Hello everyone. For those of you who are working on the R track in this next class, I wanted to show you a new way that I want you to be able to generate your files, your R files, and be able to share them with me. What we're going to do is we're going to use R Markdown. And when we use R Markdown, we go into RStudio and we go to New File and we carefully go over to R Markdown. And it gives us the opportunity to create a whole new Markdown file. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a new file called, I'll call it cars. Um, it allows you also to put in your name. Once you put in your name there, it keeps it until you change it. And then we're going to tell the system a little bit about the format of the file. Now, when we create this, it's basically a file that contains all of the code that you're going to write and the execution of that code. So if your code loads data and then produces plots and visuals, when you go to save your file, it will run all of your code and generate all the output and put them all together in one file. The format of that one file can either be HTML, it can be a PDF, or it can be Word. We're going to stick with the default, which is HTML, because that's fine. You can write it out to a PDF, which is really kind of nice, but you have to download software and get that running on your machine before you're allowed to do that with a PDF. Or you can do it to Word, but like I said, we'll stick with HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and now I'm in a new environment. It's created a new environment for me. And if you'll see in the upper left-hand corner of where I would normally write my code, it gives me the title, which is car. My name is there. The date that we're actually creating this is there, and we decided we were going to have it be an HTML document. Okay. Down here below, we have what is called our first block or our first chunk of code. And a block or a chunk of code is indicated by 3 tick marks, followed by, typically it's curly brackets with an R, but this one's a little bit more fancy. So you'd have tick, 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 curly bracket, R, close curly bracket. That indicates the beginning of an R code chunk. Okay. After that, you can put whatever commands you want, loading files, you can do classification, clustering, whatever it is you want to do. You just have to, when you get finished with the chunk, do the 3 tick marks to indicate the closure of the chunk. So when you want to run those chunks, you can have your cursor in a chunk, and you can go up here and you can click on run, and you'll get a number of options down here. Things like run current chunk, that kind of stuff, run next chunk, or you can copy the commands and you can run them down here on the console just to make sure that everything works. So when you set up your code, and what we're going to be doing in the first 2 assignments is multiple commands. First one, we're going to look at ggplot, and the second one, we're going to look at another package that is used for data manipulation. I'll ask you to do several things. So set up a chunk for each one of those commands. So you'll start it, you'll have your command in there, and you'll close it. The area between the chunks is just pure documentation. So it's where you can explain to me what it is you're doing. And you don't have to use the pound sign anymore because in R Markdown, we don't have to do that. So they've done it here on R Markdown, probably just to draw it out, but it's unnecessary. Because unless you are commenting what you're doing in the chunk itself, it doesn't pay any attention to the pound sign. And you can comment in the chunk itself. In fact, it's probably a good idea to do that if your chunks get to be pretty long. So then you would have to use the pound sign to indicate that you're commenting something out. So we have a couple of chunks in here. We have a chunk here that is, this is a special chunk. And what this does is it causes the R Markdown to do something called knitting. And I'll talk about knitting in a minute. The other chunks we have is we loaded up a file called cars, and we're going to do a summary on it. And then we're going to do a plot. And so remember what I said is that it will run all of the chunks, and it will save the results of the code into a single file. Now, when we do that, we're going to do something, or to do that, we're going to do something called knitting. Okay, and up here in the top, in the bar right there, you see it says knit. Okay, if I click on knit right now, what it's going to do is it's going to run. Well, first of all, I got to give it a name. So I'll call it cars. And I want to call it cars with an RMD extension. And the reason I'm doing that is because Windows knows that anything that has an RMD extension is going to be opened in RStudio. It just saves me another chunk or another bit of time, because if I don't give it an RMD extension, then it'll try to either load it up with a different application where it will fail, or if I give it no extension, then it will ask me each time, what application do you want to use in order to be able to load this file. So I'm going to give it an RMD, okay? And it's going to go ahead and it's going to knit that file. Now what it's doing, and you'll see all the results down here, is it is creating the HTML that has in it all of the commands. You see the first one up here was summary cars. And then it That is followed by the result of that particular command. So I'm able to see everything I want to see. I had two things I did. I did the summary and I did the plot, and it puts it all in this nice file. Okay. What it's also done is it's written that out to that HTML, or I'm sorry, that RMD file. So now if you go into Windows Explorer, the file manager, you'll see there's cars RMD. That's the file you can turn into me. So I'll be able to open that in my own RStudio and I'll be able to see what you did. Okay, now a couple of gotchas. First things first, in order for the knitting process to work, the code has to be executable. So if you have any errors in your code, the knitting process will pretty much fail, simply because it can't run all parts of the code. And then I think that's the only gotcha. Yeah. So anyway, remember, when you want to start a new project or a new file, just go to New File, come over here to R Markdown, give it a name. Your name will probably be already in there. It's going to be an HTML. I'll just give this one a name so we can get past it. Okay. It gives you the boilerplate document with the information up top, and this will always be the same. It will always have this summary cars and this plot and all this other stuff. You can actually take all that out. You can go after the 3 dashes down here, and you can just remove all of it, right? And then you can create your own chunks. You can have a documentation here, and then you can do it. Tick, 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 open paren, R, close paren. And you'll see that the line is darker because now you're in a code chunk. Okay, so we can say plot. How about how we view cars? Okay, we end that and we close it out with a tick, 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 and we're out of our code block. So now what we can do is we can put in more documentation. And then we could create a new document or a new code block and continue to create new code blocks as we go. And then when we're all done, we can go ahead and click on knit. We give it a name. Once it has a name, you don't have to give it another name. It'll run the knitting of the file and give us what we wanted. Okay. It doesn't show the view because the view is oftentimes too large. Sometimes the data, especially the data we're going to be working with this quarter, is hundreds of thousands of records, so it wouldn't be able to actually fit that into the file, but it'll give you at least the command. Okay. So R Markdown is how we're going to send files to me if you're working in the R track. If you're working in the Python track, there is a whole nother thing that you need to do in order to